We are another Saturday live stream here on the Jazz Mental YouTube channel. It's Paul Tobey from Niagara-on-the-Lake in Ontario, Canada. Thanks for being here. As always, we really appreciate the fact, especially the early risers and the people that get here before the live stream even starts. So just a quick shout out to Jean-Pierre and Serge, who've already checked in on the chat. If you could go and do that too and let us know your name and where you're from, we'd super appreciate that. I can see a bunch of people here, but I can't see them in the chat yet. Let's do a quick sound check right off the bat. We've had some struggles in past weeks with sound checks, so we'd like to get that out of the way early. So let me know if you can hear my voice okay, and I'm going to play a little bit on the piano, not too much. Just let me know if this sounds clear enough to you. And some feedback on that would be much appreciated. Today, we are going to take a look at Dolphin Dance, and for some reason, it's already on your screen, which I think maybe is a good thing. And thank you for the feedback, Alan, on the sound check. And just a quick shout out to Josh from Mr. Lightning, or not from Mr. Lightning, with the handle Mr. Lightning. William, good to see you. And Gary and everybody else who's here, great to see you. All right, so like I mentioned, the sheet music that's on your screen, people have been asking for this from me. And so what I decided to do was we're going to talk about modal playing, but also people have been asking for left-hand comping ideas and right-hand mode ideas. Now, I didn't write out a solo in this particular case because I think it's a little more helpful when you're talking about modal jazz to just write the suggested mode that you would play over that chord or that group of chords. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. You can see the sheet music on your screen right now. I am going to post the download link now in the chat. Don't everybody rush there at once. Sometimes it slows down the channel and you have all session to download it. You don't necessarily need to have it right away for this session, but it is a good idea at some point throughout the session to download it. So how do I just quickly going to pin this to the chat if I can find the place to do that. There we go. I pinned it to the top of the chat, and that link will be there throughout the session. Now, a couple of comments already. Paul, I became a board certified behavior analyst recently. Woo! Well, there's a lot of behavior analysm to do in jazz, that's for sure. There are definitely some behavioral changes that are required to play this kind of music. And we all know that it's not the easiest road to travel. And that's good for us because we like the road less traveled, don't we? So here's what I'm going to do. While you're downloading that, I'm going to play the tune. So we're focused on 1965. Now that may seem like a long time ago to some of you, but it was a revolution in jazz because prior to that, the good 15, 20 years to that was really just the bebop era. And honestly, this group of people like Herbie Hancock and Miles Davis, and they really tried to push what we call the post-bop era and the beginning of the modal era, which meant more floating lines. We didn't necessarily have all this tonal behavior going on that happens in traditional, like the Great American Songbook, which is what a lot of the bebop tunes were based on. So this steps out of that, and what I want you to listen for when I play this tune, I'm going to take the sheet music off your screen just so it's not distracting. What I want you to listen to is how the music keeps time. It's like halftime feel. We've discussed this before. What is halftime feel? It means the bass is more playing 2 notes per bar versus 4, like a straight walking bass line. So listen for that. And then on top of that, I want you to kind of hear that the changes don't really go anywhere. It's not like there's this long phrase ending on this tonic chord. The tonal center floats around a lot. And I really wanted to talk about that and how to actually approach modal playing. So this wouldn't go obviously just for this tune, but tunes like So What and all the other tunes that came from that era. Maiden Voyage is an album that you should check out from Herbie Hancock, in which this tune was on. So let me play the tune. I'll solo a bit just to kind of give you an idea of where we're headed, and then I'll come back and talk quite a bit more about what we're up to today. All right, let me take this microphone offline, and I'll play a bit. Dolphin Dance. I can tell you, it's not a tune that I play a lot of. I just kind of got into it this week, and I put out a tutorial earlier on this week about how to play the actual head to that tune. It's not the easiest tune to remember because, of course, the chords, they float around a lot, and like I said, there's no real tonal center. So trying to remember where things go that in and of itself is a bit of a challenge. Sergio says, very nice. Hancock is one of my favorites. Love all the undefined sus4 chords and the pedals. And that's one of the things that I did want to talk about today, Sergio, was how to approach the pedal and really keep that rhythm going, which I think Thank you for pointing out my microphone. All right, let me do that one more time. So Sergio says, very nice. Hancock is one of my favorites. Love all the undefined sus4 chords and the pedals. And yeah, that's what we want to talk about today, is a lot of the stuff that goes into modal playing. So the first thing that I wanted to point out in that, if you're going to play this type of music, and thank you all for pointing out that I'm back. I appreciate that. Sometimes I just hit the wrong button and boom, there goes the microphones. But anyway, we're back. So what I wanted to do is just say, if you're going to play this tune, what I would recommend you do right off the bat, and let me throw up some sheet music here just for a moment. I want to throw up the tune. Well, actually, let's just put this on the screen, which is the download from today. And if you take a look at the chord changes, you're talking about changes that you're going to just have to remember. So how do we do that? Well, my suggestion is that you just commit yourself to finding decent voicings. And go 4 bars by 4 bars. So the first 4 bars is, if we were to play the melody, and then a 2/5 of C minor. And then maybe play the C minor chord, and then take a look at the next 4 bars. So C minor to A flat, back to C minor, and then a 2/5 of G. And just go at the tune like that, because remembering the changes and the way that they unfold is a lot more difficult than a tune like, you know. Simple harmony, right, has a tonal center. It's all based on F. This is based on real non-tonal centers. It just kind of floats around from chord to chord. And I think it all makes sense from a melodic standpoint if you look at the melody. The melody ties it all together. But that doesn't make it any easier to learn the chord changes. So what I would suggest, like I said, in repeat, is just take it 4 bars by 4 bars. It really does make these little 4-bar phrases like C minor to A flat, back to C minor, and then a 2/5 of G. And then we're on to the next 4 bars. Then the next 4 bars. Then we're on to the next 4 bars. And commit yourself to learning that, because it's going to be very difficult, I think, to tackle soloing on this tune without that understanding of those phrases and where they happen. It's, first of all, an interesting composition in that if you take a look at A section, it's 12 bars, B section is 8 bars, and then C section is really 10 bars, and then there's this 4-bar section at the end which kind of emanates the beginning of the tune. So while the beginning goes like this, the ending goes like this. Okay? So they're similar. The last 4 bars of the tune are similar than the first 4. It's just they use different chords and different melodic notes, even though the rhythms are the same. Well, Ben, happy birthday to you. 82nd. Wow. That's a little bit more than me. Good for you. Thanks for being here. And it is Ben's birthday, so if everybody could just kind of give a shout out in the chat area to Ben, that'd be great. All right, let's continue on. So that's number 1. Commit yourself to understanding and learning the different tonal centers of the tune, because it shifts. It's really all over the place. Sometimes you're in the key of C minor, sometimes you're in G major, sometimes you're in D flat, sometimes, and you really just need to memorize those things. Okay. The next thing when we talk about soloing really plays itself into the sheet music that I've written out here. So what do I mean by mode? So for those of you that are not familiar, a mode is just another fancy name of saying scale, but the reason why we call it modes is because in classical music, you really only have a couple of scales. You have major and minor scales. You don't have Dorian, Aeolian, Mixolydian, all those kinds of things. Now, I'm not going to talk about the names of the modes because I've never found that particularly useful. I've never been a person that said, okay, so this is the first scale. That's a Lydian scale, which it is, but I don't really need to know the name of it in order to know that that's what I'm supposed to be playing. So bar 1, which is, and let me take a quick screenshot just so I can zero in on some of the things that we're talking about here. So bar 1, which without the pickup measure is here, obviously. Now, take a look at that scale. If you look at it, it's a major scale. I think the name for that is Ionian. Unless I got that mixed up with something else. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. It's like a major scale. And then if you take a look at the next bar, this is D flat over E flat. So you kind of have to keep the same E flat tonal center while playing a D flat chord over top of it, which is really a D flat sus chord or an E flat sus chord. You want to play a G natural, which makes it a Lydian scale. But it's not important to understand the name of it. What's important is this is the scale that you would play over that. So if I'm soloing and I'm just looking at those 2 bars, I'm doing this. So the only difference between the 2 is a D flat versus a D natural. Because on E flat major 7, you don't have a D flat. The chord tone is a major 7th. So again, just like trying to remember where the tonal centers of the tune are as they move about the song, you also need to remember what each mode is and what scale to play over these chords. Now, the interesting thing about this versus bebop scales is, and maybe you could answer this in your head quickly before I give you the answer, is bebop scales have 8 notes where these only have 7. So we're not playing a bebop scale like this or like this with a B natural as a passing note. We're playing 7-note scales because it floats a little bit more. You don't necessarily need that bebop sound, which is like this. You need more of a floating sound, which is. Get the idea. So you don't need 8 notes to make a bebop phrase. What you need is a mode to make a color. And I think that's the real difference between the two. You're trying to follow patterns versus making colors. And that's what this tune is all about. It's about tricking the ear into hearing all the different sus chords and major 7th chords, things like that, and not really feeling a solid tonal center. So then when we get down to bar 4, which is here, you'll notice that this is a 2-5 going to C minor. So D half diminished 7th to G7. So what I've done is I've split up the scale. I've put 4 notes for this one and 4 notes for this one because it's a good idea to know what scale you're playing. So if we take a look and analyze that, the first part of the scale is just part of the C minor scale, right? And if you go up the scale and you get to here, we need a passing note to get to the root of G. And then G7 has a flat 9 and a sharp 9. So if we were to put those 4 bars together, you'd get something like this. And so on and so forth. So I think that's what I've tried to do with this sheet music, is suggest the most simplest mode for each particular chord. And it's a good idea just to play that mode over and over again over the particular chord. So if we were to move on to A, you have this C minor, which is, for those of you that want to get really technical about it, that is an Aeolian mode. Why? Because it's the 6th note of an E flat major 7th chord. So if we play an E flat chord, or E flat scale, it's the same scale except we're starting on C. Now, the next thing that I wanted to point out is I've suggested some very powerful left-hand voicings. And so if you're learning this, what I would suggest is along and in addition to playing the right hand, you play the suggested chord voicings because it's going to help you kind of remember where things are. Now, you'll notice that this particular chord voicing for the first bar is voiced in force, or what we call chordal voicings. So you've got the third of the, the root, you've got the, oh, actually, let me play the actual chord that's written. You got the 9th of the scale, you've got the 5th, and you got the root. And then in the next chord, you're just going up the scale, and you're playing the 3rd, the 13th, and the 9th. And if we were to go up the scale and keep going, and I added some passing chords in there, but you get the idea. So you can play the suggested left-hand comping and then go to the next one. And the next one. And I'm not going to play the entire exercise for you, but I think it's a good idea to study that and say, okay, so why does this make a good voicing for a C minor 7th chord? And I'm playing this voicing right here. Why does that make a good voicing? Because it contains the 3rd, the 13th, and the 9th. You could also play this one, 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 but you get the idea, right? You're just really using the scale and separating the notes by 4th intervals instead of thirds, which is more of a floaty type sound. You play a chord like this, it has much more of a tonal center than this. Get the idea? And that's what the exercise is all about. It's training you to put the mode together with the proper, or at least a suggested left-hand voicing. Proper meaning there are others that you can use, as we've discussed, from the scale of the moment. So all we're doing is we're taking force out of this scale for C minor. Right? And that's all you have to do. That's, again, a much more non-tonal center than traditional music. For example, if we were to go back to Bye Bye Blackbird, you're playing voicings like this. Whereas this is kind of like... Now, you can still use some bebop language in there like I did. But again, it's a little more, and that was just an example of an enclosure. It's just a little more color than it is strategic, sort of like phraseology of bebop. And that's why they called it the post-bebop era. They wanted to get away from that sort of strict confines of what the bebop language is and not have a language. It's more of like a language of color. And that's the goal of the piano player in this particular style. All right, let's check in with everyone. That's a lot of information. Let's see if you have any questions. So Ed asks, and I thank you for the question. Actually, it's not Ed, it's Easy Helper. I'm not familiar with your first name, Easy Helper. If you could share that with us, that'd be great. So if not by node name, it's actually mode, I think is what you meant. Do you mean your ear to remember the modes? No, I don't mean your ear. What I mean to say is that in a tune like this, it's important just to remember where the notes are in the mode. And you don't necessarily need to name them. Just remember where they fit in the scale. Now, we all know that is a major scale, so that one's going to be fairly easy. But when you get to D flat over E flat, it's more of like a Lydian scale. But just remember where they are. It's got a natural... it's got a augmented fourth instead of a natural fourth, which is the sharp 11, right? So if you feel, and again, this is really just personal preference, if you feel, Easy Helper, that it's important to call them something, then just compare what I've written with what they're actually called and write it out on top. If you think that's going to help you. I personally never liked that. I've never been an improviser that went, oh, this is a good place for an Aeolian flat 9 scale. No, it's not possible for me to think like that. I think more in terms of what is the chord and what is the most appropriate notes to play over top of that chord, and try to recall from, obviously, practice memory, what is the best scale to play over that situation. I hope that answers your question. Hey, Emoti, Happy birthdays to Rich as well, or to Ben. Wishing you many more journeys around the sun or stars. Yes, absolutely. Amodi says, wow, never thought of modes as coloring, but I do get it. Thank you. You're welcome. Alan says, may I stop you for a second? Okay, stop. Let's look at the C minor 7 at A. Why not an A flat in the left hand when you are using Aeolian mode? Okay, so now we're going to get super technical, Alan. And I know you're an advanced technical person. We've seen this from your submissions in the private master classes, which, by the way, it's nice to have you there. So he's talking about this. Let me erase what's on the screen here. So specifically what he's referring to is that note, which in this particular case is an A natural. And if you look at the mode itself, it has an A flat. So what's Paul doing and what's he talking about? And what I'm talking about here is if you play an A flat over a C minor like this, that just sounds flat out wrong. So there are specific notes of the scale that you cannot play. So I should have mentioned that before, is like if the chord sounds wrong, which it does, right? You can't play anything over that. Because this creates the wrong tritone. This is a tritone used by E7 or B flat. We're not in E7 or B flat. We're doing a C minor chord. So what you do is you shift one note that sounds wrong in the appropriate direction. In this particular case, we're going to move it up a half step. If you move it down a half step, then you've got a third in the bottom and a fifth. So really, what you're doing is you're just moving it up a half step. And then this chord is also an F7 chord because it does contain the proper tritone, which is a C minor to F7 to B flat. And that explains that. Let's do it, I think, clarify one more time. If you're going up the C minor scale and you're starting on C minor here, that sounds right with the actual notes of the scale. That sounds right. This sounds wrong. So what you do is you modify one of those notes by a half step, in this case up, to make it fourths, and it just sounds a lot nicer. Now, I could have suggested that you play this chord, which contains the third and the seventh and the ninth of C minor. You can do that. I'm just suggesting this one. You can play this one, and this one, and this one, and you can keep going up the scale, correcting anything that sounds wrong. Typically what happens when it sounds wrong is it either creates a flat 9 with the melody, or it creates a tritone in the wrong place, the wrong tritone. If you add a tritone that's not inherent of that particular key of the moment, then it just sounds wrong. Let's see if we got some feedback from Alan on that. I hope that answers your question. Allison said, do these non-traditional voicings work on the older jazz standards or just the things from 1965 or on? Interesting question. I would say they work on everything. So let's apply them to a tune like, I don't know. Well, let's just go back to, and I don't know why it popped in my head in the first place. Well, no, let's play another tune. I don't know. No. I think what's the best way to... Okay, let's do this. So the tune is Stella by Starlight. These are traditional voicings. So the question is, can we play these types of voicings over top of that? The answer is yes. And what happens is that you make a more modern arrangement out of it. So instead of this, you get this. And it tends to change the quality of the tune in terms of making it a more modern sound because it's adding more hollow voicings, just like we've been talking about today. So to answer your question, it's a good idea to do that in certain circumstances. If you're playing with advanced players and your sound is a more modern sound, then use voicings like that. If you want to play solo piano and you want to play more traditional so that people really like the tune, play a little more tertian harmony, right? And then put a little dissonance here and there. I hope that answers that question. Ben, you are welcome for the birthday shout out. My pleasure. Alan, again, in other words, what scale are you actually thinking about with the C minor 7th, Aeolian, or minor dominant? I'm not thinking about names, like you pointed out, Aeolian or minor dominant. I'm thinking more about what is the chord that we're playing and a combination of sound that I'm making that is appropriate for that moment. And because I have all of these scales underneath my fingers, I'm pulling them out at random. I'm not necessarily saying that every time you play a C minor 7, you must play this scale. I will switch it up and I will play bebop scales and I will play dominant scales, and I'll put in a sharp 9 if I feel like it. That's my philosophy on these things. But again, you have to get to that point. So for now, let's just say the suggestion that I'm making is in the context of whatever tonal center you're at in the moment is the most appropriate mode or scale for that particular moment. That's all I can say about that. I'm not going to get into naming. I don't even know what, honestly, I do know what an Aeolian scale is, but if you said, play quickly out of your head, play an Aeolian flat 9 scale, I would have to think about that. And it's just too much thought that you have to put into soloing at that particular moment. There's no way that I would be going, okay, so this is a Lydian scale, and this is the only thing I can do on that moment, and this is a Lydian scale. If I wanted to switch it up, but I've got Lydian banged into my head, there's no opportunity for listening and hearing the different sounds. And then it switches to another chord, and then automatically I got to go, oh, what is this? This is a Dorian, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. It's like we're moving to G, stick to G. And if you want to put some passing notes in, put some passing notes in. Or play a chromatic scale or play a diminished scale. Again, I just don't have I just didn't learn that way. I didn't learn that this mode applies to this chord in this context, and that's the only thing you can do. I'm looking for color in this context. I hope that answers that question. And Easy says, thanks, just wanted to get inside your head and get a better understanding of what you were thinking and how you were hearing the modes. Stephanie, yeah, or Steph. Thank you. Alan says, the wrong tritone. Now that's a good thing to remember. It is, and it's wrong. There's no way that you can look at that chord in the context of C minor and go, this is the right thing to play. It's not, because it's putting this tritone in there, which does not match. That works, but this does not. It just doesn't work. So you have to really think about those things as you're playing. The great thing about, and we're talking to Josh here, Mr. Lightning, the great thing about fourths is you can use them lower and higher than you use thirds. Well, thirds I think can go high as well, but low is a very different thing. So let me play a traditional voicing for a C minor 7th chord, but let me go way down here, okay, like this. It starts to get really, really super muddy, and then if you go down from there, and the more you go, it's just like, well, this is an A flat minor 7th chord, but it sounds very different here than it does here. Here it's just so, there's so many overtones, it's just too muddy to make sense. However, if you play these things, they tend to be much less committed to a tonal center, which makes them a lot more versatile. Work really well up here too. Versus, it's a different sound, right? Versus this. Okay. I hope that answers that question. If you want people to like the tune, that's actually sort of funny. It is sort of funny. Like, if there's our ears, we're jazz pianists, or I'm sure some of you play other instruments as well. I know that there are drummers here. We have ears. The average person does not have ears. So if you want them to actually like the tune, there's only so much you can do to a song before it starts to sound like, what are we listening to again? Like, again, if you take a traditional tune, like, I don't know where my brain is today, but let's just do, and if you turn that into, I don't even know what I was playing. If you turn that into like more of a forced exercise and a more of a modal exercise, you get something like this. Versus which is You'd Be So Nice to Come Home To. Let's play it in a different key. Switch to modal. the average listener is going to listen to that and they're like, what's the tune again? What are you playing? So you kind of have to consider the audience at some point, I think is a good idea. It's something that I don't know how many of you play concerts or things like that, but it's something that I always had to keep in mind over the years, because as a recording artist, my goal was to make music that people actually liked. Now, you might think that everybody likes everything. For example, if somebody listened to Brad Mehldau play or somebody listened to Herbie Hancock play, you play that stuff for the average person and they'd be like, man, I don't know what you're talking about. It's like speaking a completely different language, which is why jazz has always been a musician's music. But even for musicians, there's a limit to what you can handle. How many of you have ever heard atonal music? Or, well, I guess atonal is probably the best term for it. It's music that has absolutely zero tonal center, and it's built on 12-tone scales. So things like this, where you've got like just colors, colors, colors. And it's all about, just making sounds. I've heard music like that before, and even me, I'm like, wow, where's this going? Music, in my view, has to go somewhere. And even in a tune like this, while it floats a lot, Dolphin Dance, it does go somewhere, which I think is a cool thing about the tune. So it kind of strides both worlds. It's coming out of the bop era and heading into the post-bop era, but being really inventive. I mean, one of the things that I found very interesting about this tune is if we analyze it from an actual harmonic standpoint at certain points, right? So we're nice tonal center of E flat minor, but right away, just a pedal note ring, and then a 2/5 of C minor. To G. Who does that? Who goes from C minor to G? And then a 2/5 of G flat, which should go to G flat, right? But it doesn't. It goes to F minor. So you've got all these 2/5s that just kind of jump from chord to chord with no real tonal center. And then every once in a while, he just hits a pedal note and then plays. And then a 2/5, which is a backdoor 2/5. I've learned this term recently. 2/5 of E flat, which is a major chord with a sharp 11 in it. And then he goes to A minor. What is the relationship between these two? There isn't one. This is not even part of the same scale. And then he switches to B minor, and then goes to C sharp minor. So it's just kind of like floating all over the place. But in the context of the tune and the way that he does it is actually brilliant in my view. I would, just as an exercise, and I'm going to play a little bit more in just a minute of this tune, because I'm not sure I can think back to the way that I played it at the beginning of the session. It's probably going to change from there, because as I listen to the ideas that you're throwing me, try to incorporate some of those ideas. So I'm going to play a little bit differently. I would compare what you're going to hear and go and listen to Herbie play this tune from 1965. All you need to do is on YouTube, just put in Dolphin Dance from Maiden Voyage, and you'll probably get 10 or 12 different YouTube channels playing the same tune, none of whom are earning any copyright revenue, obviously. But, that's not the point. The point is that what I want you to do is I want you to compare my playing to Herbie's. What I'm going to say about Herbie's playing, he was 24 years old at the time. For somebody at 24 to write a tune this beautiful is remarkable. And then if you actually listen to his soloing on the album, in my view, and I'm going to get in trouble from a lot of probably Herbie fans and purists and stuff like I was not blown away by the way he solos on this tune at the age of 24. It's kind of like he lacked some harmonic knowledge for a tune that he created, which is very interesting in and of itself. And a lot of people might say, what are you talking about? He wrote the tune. He's got total control and command. No. No. He was 24. And he wrote something that sounded good, but then when it came to soloing, he wrote this chord, and I could tell, and he's playing, he's like, well, I don't even know what to play over that, so let's just do this, play some kind of scale or something. Like, it was weird. And so in my view, it wasn't the greatest solo that Herbie ever played. He got better as time went on. And again, I totally apologize to all the Herbie fans out there. He got better. But it's funny. Go listen to it and compare it. It's funny when you listen to the album before this one, which was, this. Where am I going here? Yeah. And you listen to all of them solo. These guys were like 21 years old. It was not brilliant soloing in my view. But hey, I'm just throwing it out there. I don't mean to be totally controversial, but everybody gets better over time. When I was soloing at 24, I can tell you I was nowhere near at Herbie's level. But now I look back at it and I listen to it and I go, yeah, he needs some work for sure. So this is not easy for anyone, no matter who you are. So Ben says, thanks for your answer about force opening up the lower register with a less muddy sound. The fifth is universal. Yeah, I mean, playing pedal notes, right? A lot more like McCoy Tyner did. Herbie wasn't actually doing that kind of thing at this time. So McCoy Tyner is a good example of that. Alan, you're back. Hope I am not being a pest. No. But back to thinking about that tonal center in bar 11. What tonal center are you thinking about? Would it be G flat major? And you just so happen to be playing an F minor 7th over G flat? Okay. Well, let's go look at bar 11. Here, I think, is what you're referring to, or are you? So that didn't make sense according to your question. Hang on. So okay. So anyway, my thought process for this bar versus this bar is two different tonal centers. So the first one, A flat minor 7, which is the voicing that I put in the left hand, to D flat 7. These are more traditional type voicings. I'm totally thinking G flat in that context. And then I immediately switch to E flat. For the next two bars. So in the context of that 4-bar phrase, first G, second G flat, or F sharp as it were, and then the third one is E flat. Interesting relationship between those two. 3, G goes to G flat, goes half step down, and then goes down a whole step. So it's weird in that context, and that's why you need to think, well, what is the tonal center at the moment, which is kind of contrary to what we're talking about, because there is no real tonal center to the tune. There shouldn't really be any tonal centers to the chords. But if you throw it all out, then you end up with randomness. So you have to have some type of tonal center going on at every given moment. It's just we're moving them so quickly. Let's go back here. Thank you for the question. Rich says, Bill Evans covered this tune really nicely. Yes. Maiden Voyage was all about the horn section. Yeah, that's true. You know, I think Herbie did rely a lot on the horns. If you listen to it, the actual recording, they're playing not in unison. They're harmonizing each other. And a lot of that is thirds and fourths for sure. And sixth as well. I actually haven't sat down and tore that apart, but yeah, you got two horn players, sax and trumpet, playing, again, not in unison. They're playing harmonies to each other. Modi says, at 24, how many stories and life experience can one infuse in this music, in their music? Yeah, it's probably a lot. I won't even comment on that because I just don't know. I do know that at 24, I wasn't out performing concerts like Herbie Hancock was. So again, I didn't mean to throw Herbie under the bus, but any competent piano player can listen to the music from that album and go, yeah, there's some harmonic knowledge that's lacking here in some context. So I notice nobody hasn't taken any pot shots on me about that yet. Jerry says, in relation to Alan's question about C minor seventh, according to Mark Levine's book, F7 is a valid substitution. This is what I've been talking about. And that's what this chord is. It's an F7 chord. So in that context, it's a valid substitution, whereas this is not. You cannot use that A flat on a C minor 7 chord. So thank you for backing me up on that. I appreciate it. Jerry was the one that said that. Okay, Sergio, first jazz record I heard was Korea Hancock Duo. I keep thinking at the moment, I think Hancock uses a music or sheet music in between the strings and making weird sounds. Loved the experimentation. Yeah, these guys were a lot about experimentation. Dawn, how is Nancy? Nancy is good. She had an immunotherapy treatment on Monday, so she was knocked out for Tuesday and Wednesday and most of Thursday. She bounced back a bit, and then, yeah, it's day to day. Thank you. I appreciate everybody looking out for Nancy. It's definitely a challenge for us, for sure. And I appreciate those of you that have her in your prayers. Thank you. We have never heard any criticism of Herbie, so we are silently stunned. I knew it would... Anything that I am the most kindest person when it comes to feedback. But the point that I tried to make was, if you go and listen to it, you tell me next session, when we reconvene a couple weeks from now, we're not going to meet next week because I have another commitment, and I haven't missed a Saturday since I've been back from last summer. Back from Portugal. So the opportunity to miss a Saturday doesn't come up very often, but I do have another commitment, so I will not be here for next Saturday. I apologize for that. But when we reconvene 2 weeks from now, I want you to let me know some feedback on what you heard. Now, don't just go and listen to it once and go, yeah, I'm done. That sounded interesting. Move on. It sounds great. No, really listen to it. And you tell me, did he nail it 100%? Were there areas that he could improve? Did he lack some harmonic knowledge? Did he flub some notes here and there? In my view, he did. So, nobody plays perfectly. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that everybody is at a certain level at a certain point in their life, and 24, there's things to learn. That's all I'm saying. Wow. Paul Tobey creating controversy. Well, some backup here from Emoti. No, it's not throwing Herbie under the bus. It's talent, which most of us have, but skill. It's the time we put into the craft that allows us to express ourselves on a higher level. Yes, absolutely. And also, Emoti says, no worries about next Saturday. It's cool. Hey, thank you. I'll give you all a week off. Yeah. I'm going to play. First thing I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to just put up a piece of sheet music on the screen. By the way, the sheet music that you were supposed to download, it's still pinned to the top of the chat. What I'm going to do right now is, and I sent everybody an email on this, is if you want the arrangement that I wrote out for Dolphin Dance, I'm going to make that available for a couple more days. And there is a coupon here to get it at half off. So let me post that in the chat area now. And thank you so much for considering that every purchase, because it does take time and effort to put these things together. And that arrangement is a solo piano arrangement that you will not find anywhere. It does not exist. In fact, I scoured the internet and MuseScore to find a solo piano arrangement of this tune that actually made sense. I could not find one. So to actually have one where you can play it solo piano and make it sound decent, that's the arrangement for you. So every purchase you make supports the channel and helps us continue our mission. Thanks for doing that. It's now pasted in the chat area. I am not going to pin it to the top because I want the free sheet music to be there, but it's here just above Rich's comment, which says, watch Herbie play that tune now solo piano, it will blow your mind. Yeah, exactly. That's my point. Everybody progresses. Nobody rests. Jazz piano players don't go, I'm good enough, that's it. Everybody is struck by the music, has it in their soul, and goes, I want to make better music. And that's what Herbie has done over the years. Thank you for pointing that out. All right, let me play the tune, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more. Let's see how this one goes. I'm going to try and make some different music than I did the first time around. So Rich says, beautiful solo arrangement. I like what you did with the bass lines and pedal tones. So the thing is about pedal tones, one of the things I didn't mention is if you are playing pedal tones, you have to keep the rhythm going. You can't just throw down a pedal tone and just leave it there because it fades out. So what you want to do is play on the offbeats. 1, 2, ba, 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 ba. So on the end of the beats, like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and play on the ands. So you're putting the bass note down with your 5th finger, and then with your 1st finger or your thumb, you're playing on the end of the beat, right? And then a lot of times I'll just throw down a pedal like this, like a 5th in the bass. Right, things like that. Tom says Ernie was in his or I guess you're talking about Herbie, was in his formative years at that time, and he was experimenting. He has evolved since then into a master jazz pianist. Absolutely. We have already mentioned this. Thank you. Rich, beautiful solo arrangement. Oh, yeah, I already did that one. So very nice. Clap, clap, clap. You're welcome. Can I ask what you are wearing in your ears? Yeah. You'll notice that I do this every once in a while. That's because they tend to move around a little bit. I have tinnitus. It's really bad. And it came from obviously playing a lot, locking myself in a practice room, playing concerts, having ride cymbals in the back of my head and in my ears for like 20 years. And tinnitus is a loud ringing in the ears. It knocked me out for a couple of years, and then tendinitis as well. I had all kinds of health problems, but I still have tinnitus really badly and hyperacusis, which means that I'm hypersensitive to loud noise, and this piano is loud. If you were in this studio and you were standing right there, you would go, oh my, like this sounds so, you know, it just sounds mellow over the recording. That's because the microphones are set up to kind of capture the quality of the piano without like that blisteringly loud sound. But this is a 7-foot Ebach concert grand. Like it's powerful. And so I have to wear ear protection in order to keep my tinnitus from going haywire, but also just protect my ears because loud noise actually hurts. My ears are very sensitive. And if you don't know what hyperacusis is, just AI it or something. And thanks for the question. But the reason why I do this is because they dislodge and let sound through, so the sound is not even. So I have to have them in evenly in order. And these are like actual musician earplugs. And you have to have them positioned properly in order to kind of get an equal amount of sound in each side. So if one leaks a little bit, it just makes the sound really weird and you get too much volume in one side or the other. Thank you for the question. Sergio, thanks so much. Another great Saturday. We'll miss you next week. Thank you. Appreciate that. By the way, do you perform around sometime? I do about 5 or 6 concerts a year. I know that you're in Toronto. Maybe something coming up there. I'm not quite sure. It's not really my focus these days. I'm still running a business and I'm still running the YouTube channel, which takes a lot of my time. So, and you know, honestly, I'm done with gigs. I've done them. I did a lot of years of them. And so playing gigs is not really at the top of my list. Concerts, on the other hand, is one thing. I don't currently have a manager. And so it's a little bit more difficult to get out there. And again, it's not really my focus. But yeah, I'll keep you posted. Anybody that's on my mailing list at jazzmental.com will get notified of anything that's upcoming. All right, that's it for another Saturday. Thanks. One reminder, grab the sheet music. I'm going to take it down immediately after this session. The offer for the other sheet music, you'll receive an email about that. We're going to take next Saturday off. I will not see you next Saturday because I have another commitment which is taking me away, and I won't be here. So thanks so much for hanging out with me. It was fun. I like this tune. How many of you had a good session? You can comment. Also, when the session is done, if you could just hit the thumbs up button on the actual video, that would be great. It helps us a lot. And make a comment there as well. We haven't got a lot of comments on the Jazz Mental channel this week for some reason. I don't know what's going on, but with a lack of comments, the channel doesn't do very well. It's part of the YouTube algorithm. So if you could say something in the comment section, I'd much appreciate it. Thanks so much. Happy Saturday to everybody. For everybody, gave prayers for